Tonight with the Planning Commission, but there is one item that might invite some discussion. And so there are some members of the public that might want to participate. So just as a reminder, the meeting is being held via Zoom. The ways that you can participate in a Zoom meeting are to use the raise your hand function, the chat function, or *9 if you're calling on the phone. And you'll hear a prompt from our chair when we're inviting discussion. And with that, I will turn the meeting agenda back over to our chair.
Thanks, Director Powers. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 24th of 2021. We'll start with a roll call, please.
Joan Franzoy.
Here.
Jeff Jar. Brian Cullen.
Here.
Brian Kelly.
Here.
Medina Atchison.
Here.
Sherry Budd.
Here.
Carol Thompson.
Here. Thanks, Ms. Harmon. And I think Commissioner Jar is here. He just stepped away from his computer for a minute.
No, he was unfortunately stuck on mute, but he is here.
Good to see you. Thank you. All right, we have an agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
Support. Commissioner Franzoy, was that?
Bud.
Mr. Budd. Okay, thanks. And that'll be a roll call vote, please.
Brian Cullen.
Yes.
Brian Kelly.
Yes.
Medina Atchison.
Yes.
Sherry Budd.
Yes.
Jeff Jar.
Yes.
Joan Franzoy.
Yes.
Carol Thompson.
Yes, thank you. We also have minutes from the meeting of February 10th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Kelly, support.
Support Commissioner Jar.
Commissioner Jar. And that also is a roll call vote, please.
Sherry Budd.
Yes.
Medina Atchison.
Yes.
Brian Kelly.
Yes.
Brian Cullen.
Yes.
Jeff Jar.
Yes.
Joan Franzoy.
Yes.
Carol Thompson.
Yes. All right, that takes care of our housekeeping, and we can move right into new business. We have one item on the agenda for tonight, and it is discussion of the lot coverage zoning amendment zoning ordinance text amendment. The proposed amendments would revise definitions of lot coverage under section 2.102 definitions and regulations related to lot coverage under section 4.10 footnotes to the schedule of regulations. This is of the Van Buren Township zoning ordinance. And it is in order to relax lot coverage requirements related to unenclosed roof structures. And I think Director Power, you have an overview for us, kind of get us steered in the right direction before we hear any recommendations.
Yeah, I'll set up the discussion with overview, and then I will ask our planning consultant, principal planner, Vidya Krishnan, to go over the findings in her report. We are asking the Planning Commission to consider what we think is a practical approach to an issue that has arisen from our zoning ordinance that was from a well-intended and well-placed zoning standard, but that we realize there is room for flexibility and reasonableness in the way the standard is applied. So the issue at hand is that we, like many communities, regulate lot coverage, and the intention of a lot coverage limit for a variety of different zoning districts is going to be to limit the intensity of development, limit the runoff leaving a site, and to promote the preservation of open space. Those goals can be achieved in a number of ways. Lot coverage is a very practical way to achieve that. Our ordinance has in its definition of lot coverage roofed structures specifically. And what we're finding is that in certain cases on industrial sites, the application of the roofed structures particularly can be redundant because there may be already areas that are impervious, that roof structures are merely meant to provide some shelter for for impervious areas that may have materials stored outside and things of that nature. So with limits in place, we have a recommendation to revisit this zoning ordinance standard based on some findings from other communities. And so that's what I would like Principal Planner, Ms. Krishnan, to go over in more detail, if she could.
Thank you, Director Fowler. At the last week, we had a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. We had an applicant appear before the board. It was Niapco Drivelines that is located on Haggerty Road. Their proposal was for operational reasons. They wanted to build a roofed structure in the rear of their building. Basically, it is a large awning with support poles to cover. It would be in an area where there is already an existing parking lot. Niapco had previously received Planning Commission approval for outdoor storage. However, with the weather being what it is in Michigan, they needed their outdoor storage to be covered, not only to protect the product, but also for the safety of their employees, is what they presented, who would constantly walk in and out of the building. Now, per our zoning ordinance current regulations, lot coverage includes any roofed structure. It does not make exception for something that is unenclosed and basically just an awning on top of already existing paved area. Now, the reason why we even have lot coverage limitations in our zoning ordinance is because Van Buren is essentially flat. Over the years, we have had lots of drainage and flooding issues. By controlling lot coverage, we control the amount of building on a lot so that there is ample area for green belts, drainage, and other site improvements. So the limitation that is placed is well placed. It is not something that we want to disregard. At the same time, the applicant presented before the Board of Zoning Appeals a valid consideration saying, while they recognize the need for lot coverage, in this case, the awning above an already paved area is not going to add to the runoff. It is not going to add to the impervious surface area. And technically, it is not really adding anything to the coverage per se. So the applicant made a reasonable point. From a planning standpoint, we believe the argument they presented was reasonable. However, it is our job to interpret the ordinance as it is currently written. However, a zoning ordinance is a living document. Sometimes changes take place in development patterns for which the zoning ordinance is amended in order to accommodate those changes if found to be reasonable. So we went back and did the Board of Zoning Appeals was of two minds. So they decided that they would postpone any variance request from the applicant, subject to the Planning Commission having an opportunity to take a look whether a zoning amendment is a more reasonable way of going about it rather than granting a variance which runs with the land in perpetuity. Since then, we had an opportunity to compare Van Buren's ordinance with other similar communities, basically other townships, because their land area is the same and they have approximately the same kind of layout for industrial parcels. I looked at Lime Township, which is like Van Buren, one of the fastest growing townships in the Detroit metro area. Their zoning ordinance considers lot coverage differently. They allow for 75% lot coverage, but that lot coverage includes not just the building, it includes the parking lots, driveways, all of it. In our ordinance, we don't count parking lots, driveways, and other impervious surfaces. Our lot coverage is only building or any structures that are roofed. So that wasn't a valid comparison. So then we moved on to Canton Township immediately to our north, to Plymouth Township immediately to its north, and Northville Township, all of which would be comparable. And in all of those communities, while there was a definition for lot coverage, which was very similar to Van Buren's ordinance, they did not place any limits on industrial parcel lot coverage. The lot coverage for industrial parcels was basically regulated through compliance with green belts, setbacks, parking. The building size automatically got decided based upon all the site improvements you put in. That is the way they looked at it. So based on what we saw other communities do, based on what the applicant presented, we did not advocate removing our lot coverage limits of 35%. There is a reason we have it in there, and that is a good reason. However, we do believe that our ordinance could do with a little bit of tweaking specifically in the definitions section for lot coverage, where we would state that for industrially zoned parcels, lot coverage shall not include unenclosed roof structures that provide shelter over existing paved surfaces. So say there is a whole bunch of truck docks and they want to provide a cover over the truck docks so that when materials are being unloaded from the dock area, it protects the people who are unloading it. Right now, under our ordinance, even the overhang over the dock is considered as lot coverage because it's a roof structure. Under the definition alteration we are proposing, if the dock area is already paved and you just have a roof overhang, it technically is not lot coverage because it is not adding to the runoff or other issues. But we want to make sure that it is not open-ended, that people just go ahead and put all kinds of creative roof overhangs and now from an aerial view, the entire lot looks like it's covered. We also suggest adding a footnote to the schedule of regulations in industrial district that states unenclosed covered roof structures on existing impervious surface areas shall not exceed 10% of the total lot area up to a maximum of 20,000 square feet. And the reason we came up with this limitation is NEAPCO was asking the Board of Zoning Appeals for only a 1% deviation for lot coverage, and that 1% was 18,000 square feet. Not all our parcels are that big. We have some industrial parcels that are a lot bigger, such as any of the parcels owned by Ashley Capital. And we have many other industrial parcels that are a lot smaller. So 10% in some cases will be only 500 square feet or even just 200 square feet. And in other cases, 10% can be a lot. So we want to put an upper limit of 20,000 square feet. So by modifying our ordinance this way, we acknowledge that industrial operations, for their growth and for the way they are structured, with the weather being in Michigan what it is not an unreasonable request to provide for some kind of protection from these elements, as long as such roof covering is over area that is already paved so that they won't contribute more towards stormwater runoff. We believe it is an acceptable requirement to include in the ordinance. And it is not unlike many of our neighbors or other communities. In fact, our ordinance is still a little bit on the stricter side compared to other communities. With this addition, we believe we are still offering a reasonable option to keep industrial businesses in our community while not relaxing our rules completely. So I would be happy to answer any questions or any concerns that you might have.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Krishnan. Thank you, Director Powers. That's helpful research. Questions or comments from the commissioners?
Madam Chair.
Sure, Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you. I really like the idea of doing the amendment to help with some of the issues going on with the industrial area. I know we were talking about this mainly for awnings, but this theoretically would allow somebody to put in the like a parking garage with solar panels on it, correct? So they could come in and then do this over the impervious ground, or will we need to do something different if they were wanting to do solar powered, like they have on like Michigan State's campus and some other locations? Because this is a shelter over a existing paved surface, which we're looking at it from an awning standpoint, but you could theoretically do a solar, like a mini solar farm to help run the company.
That is a really good point. Director Power, do you have any insight on, would we consider that as being part of lot coverage if it's on already paved parking area? Say they have surplus paved area and they decide to put in a row of solar panels over there. Technically, that would be considered under this maximum 20,000 square foot limit. And I don't think that would be unreasonable either. If there is an alternative means of energy, as long as it does not exceed that, I believe it would be reasonable.
I think so as well. And I would say that any roofed structure that is otherwise permitted would be able to capture this additional credit for up to 10% or up to 20,000 square feet. And this is not directly related to Commissioner Kelly's question, but one point of clarification it's probably worth discussing here is the intent, I believe, and this is open for discussion, but the intent that we are putting into this is that everybody can build up to 35% with roofed structures on their property, and some of those may be permitted open awnings. And then additionally, you would have up to 20,000 square feet over the 35%. So in the case of Neapco, for example, I believe their total roofed structure actually goes a little over 20,000 square feet, but some of that is under the 35% threshold. So what we're asking for is for an additional credit of up to 20,000 square feet beyond what's already permitted under the 35%.
Madam Chair.
Sure, Commissioner Jar.
Director Power, through the chair. The proposal seems like it's adding a limitation on the area that could be constructed with roofing, with an unenclosed roofed area. Right now, if you wanted to have your lot covered 35% and have it just be one large open roof, you could do it as long as you were under 35%, as long as it was well, there are some other constraints in another section, but you could, with planning commission permission, you could build one up to 35% right now. If we took these recommendations in, it seems like those recommendations would necessarily limit the number or the area of the roof structure. Is that the case?
I don't think that is the intention.
Right. I don't think it is the intention, but I think that's the effect. Does that make sense?
It does. And you mentioned other sections of the zoning ordinance. There will be architectural standards that apply to a development where in most cases you're going to have a building that's an enclosed building that has to be constructed that meets certain architectural requirements. So it will be a rare situation where you have most of your lot coverage from an unenclosed roof structure. But I do think the intent is to allow you, the 20,000 square foot limit is only a limit that's intended to be in addition to the 35% coverage that the lot can already have. And we'll make that clarification in the zoning. If that's, and maybe Vidya, maybe you have some insights on that as well, if that was what you pictured as the intention.
Frankly, I'm a little lost. I didn't get what Commissioner Char was trying to convey. So
I'm sorry. I'd be happy to try to express it again.
Would you please, because you lost me there.
Sure. Right now, the only constraint on an unenclosed roofed structure is the 35% lot coverage, correct? I mean, that's pretty much true. If we took these recommendations and codified them, then there would be a limit on the area, and it would be under 35%. It would be limited by your footnote. You understand?
The footnote would be in addition to the 35%. Is that the clarification you're looking for? The 35% is given. The 35% can include the building. It can include existing roof structures. Say the actual footprint of the building and any shed or whatever is only 30%. They can go up to that 5%. We are giving them an additional 10% for the roof structures. So maybe I can, okay, that makes sense. Okay, maybe the footnote needs a clarification to say that the 10% is in addition to whatever that can be granted under the existing 35%.
Yeah, I think the text of it would need to be more clear on that, or we've left it open to interpretation again. I do want to say I like Commissioner Kelly's comment on the solar panels and the roof coverings. I had considered that when I was looking over the packet. I thought, oh yeah, if we allow these changes in, it allows more than just a waiver for industrial outdoor storage area coverage, which I believe is what Neapco was looking for. This would allow a wider set of changes to our code. I think that merits more discussion. Do we want to allow, say, truck awnings? That's something that these changes would allow. Whereas before, if you wanted to put a truck awning up, it would necessarily count against your 35%. It's a wider set of changes than allowing a waiver for safety purposes in an industrial storage area. if that makes sense.
I think I need to clarify that by awnings, we are not talking about those temporary fabric covers that go over the entrance or something. We are talking about structures that actually require a building permit to be permanently anchored to the ground. So currently in the market, if they have those retractable fabric awnings, technically the fabric awning could go 40 feet and we still don't count it as lot coverage. They could do that today and we wouldn't be able to say that, no, you cannot do it because it's a retractable awning and technically it's not coverage. The fact that this is a permanent structure anchored to the ground, in some ordinances, it's clearly defined that coverage is if it's roofed and enclosed. In our ordinance, we clearly say only roofed. Yes, the consequence of adopting such a change will mean that we are opening up to other types of roofed structures, which may include solar panels, carport-like structures, unless the Planning Commission wants to put a limit on exactly what kind of roofed structures are acceptable and what are not. Technically, yes, roofed structures, say there is a parking area with 20 cars for their executives to park, and now they want to put up a carport structure. Would that be considered as a roofed structure or would that be considered as an accessory structure? Because carports are currently defined as accessory structure, but technically they can also be considered as a roofed structure. Whether they would be in excess of that 35% lot coverage, because right now under the 35% we would consider carport also as part of those. So that's a good point. Yes, that is exactly why we wanted this discussion, because sometimes a simple language can have unintended consequences, like opening up.
I would say one more comment on it, that if the proposed changes were more targeted, if they were an addition to Section 5101, the development for industrial, the development standards for specific uses of outdoor storage, if we had an ability for the Planning Commission to waive the overall lot coverage for unenclosed roof structures over permitted industrial storage areas, I'd be all for it, because I think the issue in the zoning board meeting was that the applicant brought up was a safety issue. They have an outdoor storage area that the township permitted. Unfortunately, we're forcing them to make a choice between some additional safety for their workers or counting against their lot coverage. I don't think we should be putting our industries in that position. I think the Planning Commission ought to have the ability to, when we permit an outdoor storage area, also permit coverage of that storage area and not have it count against the overall lot area, so that an industry isn't forced to make that choice between marginal safety and lot coverage. If we take the recommendations that you've made, they're good recommendations and they solve the problem. My concern is that they may open up additional development unintended consequences that maybe we aren't anticipating.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying the changes are bad. That's the point I hope to make to the commission. Thank you.
Absolutely. I believe your comment and Commissioner Kelly's comment are on the dot. Yes, it might seem like a simple addition, but yes, it might open it up. As I was discussing it with you, I realized that, what happens if you put a carport in now? We do define carports separately as accessory structures, but on an industrial parcel, technically it can fit under this definition also, which would leave it open to interpretation, which is not what we want. I think it would not be too difficult for us to specify that for industrially zoned parcels, lot coverage shall not include unenclosed roof structures that provide shelter over existing paved surfaces approved for outdoor storage. If a clarification like that is added, it would sort of narrow the scope and nail it down to meet the needs of industrial parcels without opening it up for interpretation.
Well, I think that would be an excellent avenue to explore. And even if it was just an addendum, a point J in Section 5101 that allowed planning commission discretion in the case of safety issues, I think that would be worth exploring.
Mhm.
I would hesitate to just leave it open as planning commission flexibility issues, because then you will get an argument from literally every applicant trying to make their case. So maybe planning commission flexibility up to a certain limit that you can
Yes, I
approve.
think that actually that's a very wise thing to consider, and we shouldn't have just carte blanche ability to grant that. It should be within limits. One of the reasons I was thinking in section 5101 is that if you limit it only to outdoor storage areas, that's like a 2-page section of constraints. Outdoor storage areas are already very highly zoned. It's one of the reasons why the NEAPCO request makes sense. It looks on the surface like it makes sense. It really, letting them put that cover on there doesn't seem like it would have that great an impact. One of the reasons is because it's already a permitted outdoor storage area that is under significant zoning constraints. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Good points, Commissioner Jar. Other questions or comments from the commission?
Through the
I got
chair.
a question, Madam Chair.
Sure, Commissioner Cullen.
What about green roofs? Being new to this, I don't know all the regulations, but what happens if he came to you with a addition for coverage, but we're going to make it a green roof? We're going to put sod and grass to absorb the water. Does that have an effect on the square footage allowed and direction that way?
Right, good question. Director Howard, does the materials for the roofing make a difference on what's being proposed?
My thought would be, well, green roofs are going to be an innovative solution to a stormwater issue and an aesthetic issue. It's an innovative feature of architecture that I think we encourage overall, but in the interest of enforceability and in the interest of looking at the other issues, not just whether a surface is pervious or not, but also the overall building intensity of a site, I think I'm inclined to think you'd want to still keep green roofs housed as a roof that's regulated under the zoning ordinance. That would just be my interpretation. We'd keep green roofs lumped in with these other roofs that we're describing.
I agree. I think green roofs would be considered as part of green building initiatives. That is something that an applicant can apply for LEED certification as an environmentally friendly building. We would not confuse it with lot coverage or the building structure itself, because we come back once again, we are in Michigan. In winter, if we have 3 foot of ice and snow piled up on that roof, it's not going to be very pervious. You're going to have sheet draining and runoff from the roof again onto the same surface. So I would not mix green roofs with that, but that is a very valid point to consider, so that maybe we can add something to cover that before that is raised as a possible option in the future by somebody.
Good, thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Cullen?
No, I was just curious. Ford Motor Company's Rouge plant has the green roof, and that crossed my mind that maybe somebody wants to do it.
Sure, good point, good point. Other questions or comments from the commission? We have members of the audience to speak to this agenda item.
We do have members from the NEAPCO group here who might be able to provide some insight on their specific projects. So I do see Jim Jacobs, the project architect for that proposal. And by the way, while we bring Mr. Jacobs into as a panelist, if I could, Madam Chair, just have an opportunity to mention the project that is part of this discussion for NEAPCO, as well as really the vast majority of other projects where this standard is going to be reviewed on an industrial site, will also come before the Planning Commission in the form of a site plan review. So that's just something to keep in mind. Site plan review will be required for any project that adds over 1,000 square feet to a site. And so at that point, we're going to still have zoning authority to review the visual impact of accessory storage and structures over accessory storage, and how a parking area is oriented, and other types of structures that could go over part of a site. So just something else to keep in mind when you're looking at a standard like this. Anything over 1,000 square feet will be reviewed in a site plan as well. With that said, I see Mr. Jacobs is here, and so sounds like he had some comments.
All right, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for considering the text amendments before you. We really appreciate the approach. I understand how touchy and troublesome variances can be from ordinances. And so I completely appreciate where the BZA was coming from in their discussions last week when we were, or about a week and a half ago when we were reviewing this. So I think that this provides an avenue for you to address other potential opportunities that could occur in other industrial situations. So it controls the questioning of establishing a standard through a variance. So I really think that the language that's presented will address my clients' needs through NAPCO with their storage and safety concerns. So we're very supportive of the idea of the ordinance. There's a couple of things that I think that have been discussed tonight that I also was a little bit concerned about. I think the question related to whether this was an additional 10% because our awning is roughly 20,354 square feet. So we had that 354 square feet that fell within our 35%. And we were needing 18,000 in variance to comply. So this actually, with the clarity of that, would clean that up. The other thing that I think this potentially does is also helps you from an architectural aesthetic on industrial buildings. Because I can see now, I've heard the discussion just recently related to outdoor storage and covering with this roof. But when I was thinking about it, I'm thinking, oh, well, that would, an open air structure could allow for a porte cochere for a design element on an entryway to help protect the patrons coming into a building where somebody might not otherwise do that because they're saving their square footage for building footprint. So I think there's some other opportunity that this could help with some architectural features, but also addressing our clients' immediate need of protection of the outdoor storage. The green roof concept is an interesting one. One thought would be if you want to encourage green roofs, that maybe there's an extra percentage that gets associated to encourage that thought process. Or like the planner indicated that in our weather, green roofs work part of the year. The other part of the year, they tend to be just like a regular roof. So it contributes to that hard surface. So that may be something you don't want to consider. In our instance, it's not what we're looking at. The text that's been presented definitely helps us get to our goals, our clients' goals, and we appreciate your consideration of it.
Great, that's helpful. Thanks, Mr. Jacobs. We appreciate you being here tonight and sharing your ideas with us. Anyone else in the audience? Anyone else? Any other questions or comments from the commission? I have one question. I'll address it to both Director Powers and Ms. Krishnan. Are we able to clarify this only takes place for approved outdoor storage in the industrial zoning? Because I know we often are requested to approve outdoor storage in commercial zoning, and I'm not sure that we're prepared to go to covered outdoor storage in commercial and full with lot coverage.
Yes, the ordinance amendment is being suggested only for industrially zoned parcels, which will be M1, M2, and MT. No other districts, no commercial or residential districts will be included. And based upon the feedback that I have heard from the Planning Commission, I will change the text to clarify that the 10% up to 20,000 square feet is above the 35% lot coverage that they are already allowed. It will be only for approved outdoor storage areas so that we limit the scope of what is going to be permitted. We shall also take a look whether it would help to add a footnote to tie it into section 5.101, I believe, whichever the section is with regard to outdoor storage. We might also add disclaimers for any green roofs, or in case somebody proposes something like that, we can say green roofs is considered as a building or an architectural element, not to be mixed up with lot coverage determinations under this. So I can make all those changes and bring back a revised ordinance.
That's great. I think you've really captured the conversation tonight. It seemed like I had one more thing to ask. Oh, I know. For NAPCO, as well as if there's any other industrial sites that are considering covering outdoor storage. Director Powers, can you just walk us through the timeline for the amendment to be approved and them to be able to move on their request?
So it would, to assist in understanding the timeline, it's important to go over the next steps. So it sounds like the Planning Commission is interested in seeing another draft version of these changes. What I would like to present is that just a recap of the process for a zoning ordinance text amendment. Tonight's meeting is a typical sound planning practice of having a discussion first, and then we go to a state law mandated public hearing at some point. After the public hearing, maybe at the same meeting as the public hearing, the Planning Commission recommends a text amendment to the Township Board, where in that process, minor changes can be made, but major changes would have been addressed at the Planning Commission. Then the board makes 2 readings. So that's a long way of saying, at this point, to codify these changes, there still needs to be a public hearing. And so what I would ask the Planning Commission to consider is first establishing if you're comfortable with the parameters that Ms. Krishnan laid out, going ahead and advising us to put a sequence together that allows perhaps at the next meeting another discussion, and then at the one following that, a public hearing. Because only after the public hearing and after the adoption reading by the Township Board can site plan come in and propose lot coverage over 35% under these new rules, and seek approval from the Planning Commission. And that's a very specific process for one project, and we of course want to think of the big picture of how this affects all the sites. But for the NAPCO project specifically, I would just keep in mind that there has to be a public hearing and a reading by the board. And so from tonight's meeting, you're probably still looking at a month and a half until there could be a site plan review if those meetings get scheduled right away.
Good. That's a good reminder. Let's kind of get a consensus from the Planning Commission if they're comfortable with revisions to come to the next meeting and then schedule the public hearing. Anyone feel that that's a problem? Or that we somehow haven't captured the changes? I don't hear anything, so I'm going to guess that the summary from Vidya Krishnan was where we're headed for the revisions, and then we would look at that at the next meeting. But you still, Director Powers, you still want to have another discussion before we schedule the public hearing?
I think if we're comfortable with those parameters, you could recommend that we go ahead and schedule the public hearing. I think you could have a discussion at the next meeting agenda, which would be March 10th, and then we would have to already start with noticing for a public hearing at the following March meeting. So I think if you're comfortable with it, we can go ahead and schedule a discussion on the 10th and then a hearing on the 24th.
Great. Do you want an action item for that public hearing tonight?
Yes, please. And before you enter into that action item, just to double check, I did hear Mr. Jacobs make an interesting point that there are situations where you might have something like a portico over an entryway to a building and other features that have been discussed tonight. My understanding from the direction of the Planning Commission is that anything other than covering accessory outdoor industrial storage areas would still have to fall under the 35% lot coverage. That's my understanding from the Planning Commission tonight. And if there's any continued discussion you want to have about that, please clarify it. But otherwise, we'll proceed with just making the change in outdoor industrial storage areas.
Okay. Anyone, any concern about where we're at with only the 10% over the 35% and with the limitation of 20,000 plus the being attached to outdoor storage? I think we're good. In that case, is there a motion to schedule a public hearing for, tell me the date again, March 24?
The one.
Okay, let's get it right.
I thought it was March 10th.
We'll bring back some intermediate revisions on March 10th, but the hearing wouldn't be able to be held until the 24th. Just because of the noticing deadlines. Want to make sure we get that out 15 days in advance.
Okay. Is there a motion for the?
Madam
public-
Chair,
Commissioner Kelly.
I'd move to schedule a public hearing regarding the amendments for March 24th, 2021 on that meeting day.
Thank you. And support,
I'll support.
Commissioner Cullen. And that will be a roll call vote, please.
Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Medina Atchison,
Yes.
Brian Kelly,
Yes.
Brian Cullen,
Yes.
Jeff Jar,
Yes.
Joan Franzoy,
Yes.
Carol Thompson.
Yes. All right. Very good discussion. Thanks so much to Mr. Jacobs, and thanks to staff and our planner for a really great job in steering the discussion and bringing in research so that we could imagine what the changes will, how the changes will impact. We are to general discussion under tonight's agenda. Director Powers, anything, any updates for general discussion?
Just a quick reminder that there are some trainings by the Michigan chapter of the American Planning Association. So some of you folks have signed up for a risk management training that so happens to be the same night as our next Township Recreation Committee meeting. So I encourage anybody who wants to attend to go ahead and attend. I think we've already registered those interested in the March 9th workshop. We will make every effort to make sure you get the recording of the entire rec committee meeting if you want to see that. I've also heard from MAP, or Michigan Association of Planning, that they're recording all their workshops, and there's no problem with you reviewing those after the fact if you want to attend the rec committee meeting instead that night. So we can make those accommodations, but there's also I think March 10th and 11th series on site plan review, and then March 30th and 31st training series on master planning. So feel free to reach out. There's going to be plenty of other opportunities this year, but we just wanted to extend those to the planning commissioners early on.
Great. Thank you. That's so appreciated that you make that possible for us.
Welcome.
Anything else for general discussion? Planning commissioners?
Through the chair,
Sure.
I just staff for any kind of update regarding housing in the township. The end of 2020, there was some housing developments, and I just wanted to get an update on them. I haven't heard anything more about the development on Huron River Drive, lakefront properties. It was maybe condos.
Sure. I'll speak to that one first, and I can give an update on some of the other active development. There is no formal update to speak of for the lakefront development that I think you're referring to, which I think is the 41620 East Huron River Drive. Although there is what looks like a pending conditional rezoning application, which would have been the next step that we anticipated for that site. We're currently getting an understanding of what, if any, modifications are going to be part of that request for a conditional rezoning. But that seems to still be active. We just don't have a formal submittal yet. The other projects I think I gave an update on in the fall of last year, we had the continuation of the Victoria Estates condominiums on Morton Taylor Road, north of Ecorse Road. Those are still moving ahead. The phase 2 construction of the road has been built, and the water main has been built. So we're starting to see permits go out for construction in that phase. And then Cobblestone Creek, which is off of West Huron River Drive on the southwest corner of the township there. That third phase of development has not picked up yet. They were getting ready for pre-construction, but there's no movement on that third phase yet. So we'll be eager to see what happens with that. But there's still a lot of residential housing that's being built, a lot of single family home permits. Despite the pandemic last year, while we had a downtick in overall building permits, there was actually more. I think there was one more single family dwelling permit issued in 2020 than in 2019, despite the relative slowdown in other activities. So there's a lot of residential growth still occurring in the township. And at this point last year, we actually had fewer permits processed than at this point this year. So things are really, at least so far into the year, springing back in terms of construction in the township.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Atchison?
I just wanted also just an update on our senior living. I believe we have 2 developments that are somewhere. I just wanted to find out where those 2 are. One was on, I believe, Tyler Road and Morton Taylor, and the other one, I think I know where it's at, on Belleville Road.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So the Hampton Manor, which is the assisted and memory care senior living with 84 units, is there's still forward momentum. We have building permit application concurrent with a final site plan application. The final site plan is it's been reviewed by township staff. The applicant is awaiting their response from Wayne County and for their final engineering recommendation. So the Planning Commission should see that project again very soon in the form of a final site plan review. The Clover project, which is on Belleville Road, north of Tyler Road, that project had, as you saw, we asked for some feedback on the BZA request for interpretation on that project. They did have their interpretation granted by the BZA that they could credit some usable floor area toward from common rooms toward their usable floor area per dwelling unit requirement. So that allows their project to move forward based on the building footprint they laid out before. They're working through resubmitting their design and picking up again on their preliminary site plan review. So you should also see that project, we think, in the relative near future as well.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Anything else for general discussion? Any commissioners? Anyone in the audience? Sounds like we've got it for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Commissioner Atkinson. Support?
Support. I'm kidding.
Mr. Collins, say support.
Mr. Jar, were you muted?
I may have been, but I am not a cat.
I'm going to take Commissioner Jar for the support, and all in
Thank you,
favor,
Chair.
please say aye.
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 Bye.
Thank you. Good discussion. We are adjourned.